Hello and welcome to the interview here on France 24. On the menu today, Hezbollah, Lebanon's party of God. It is making headlines here in Europe because the European Union is considering whether to add the group to its list of terrorist entities. The reason for that is that Bulgaria recently fingered Hezbollah as a likely culprit behind a bombing in Bulgaria that killed 5 Israelis last summer. Joining us from Washington is one of the foremost experts on Hezbollah. He was a Deputy Assistant Secretary for Intelligence at the U.S. Treasury Department. He was an FBI analyst. He's currently a senior fellow with the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, and he's the author of a forthcoming book called Hezbollah, the Global Footprint of Lebanon's Party of God. It'll be published by Georgetown University Press. Matthew Levitt, thank you for joining us from Washington.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So what is going on with Hezbollah? For years, it has been a very powerful player in Lebanese politics, but it seems things might be changing right now. What is going on?
Well, Hezbollah is many things, and that's what people tend to lose focus on. It is both a political party in Lebanon and dominates the political scene in Lebanon today. It provides social welfare support in Lebanon. It is a standing militia that is in Lebanon that is larger than the Lebanese armed forces, and it is also an international terrorist group. Your audience in France doesn't need to be told this. In 1985-86, Hezbollah was responsible for a string of 15 bombings in Paris that brought the city to a standstill. In the late 1980s, Hezbollah was involved in attacks from Copenhagen to Italy to Germany and France. And then in the 1990s, it stopped attacks in Europe and was using Europe more as a place for logistics and fundraising, sending people, for example, into Israel through Europe to carry out surveillance or attacks there. But now 2 things have changed. The first is that in February 2008, the head of Hezbollah's terrorist wing, Imad Mughniyeh, was assassinated in Damascus. Since then, Hezbollah has been trying to carry out retaliatory attacks against Israeli diplomats, other officials, and they've been failing. But the second is that as part of Iran's shadow war with the West over the nuclear program, Iran has tasked Hezbollah, which is its primary proxy terrorist group, to carry out attacks worldwide targeting Israeli tourists. And so we saw the devastating attack in Burgas, Bulgaria last July, which killed 5 Israelis and a Bulgarian. We saw another attack in Bulgaria thwarted just 6 months earlier, targeting Israeli tourists on a ski trip, 2 plots in Cyprus, and in fact, you have right now a European citizen, a Swede, who's also a Lebanese, a dual national, on trial in Cyprus within the EU for a plot that, very similar plot targeting Israeli tourists there. This is actually the second European citizen, the second Swede to be arrested internationally. Another Swedish citizen and Hezbollah operative was arrested in Thailand last January. So between the attempt to avenge Mughniyeh's assassination and the instructions from Iran to carry out attacks targeting Israeli tourists, you see Hezbollah very much on the offensive beyond the fundraising and logistics that it has engaged in Europe and elsewhere for many, many years.
So you're saying that it's not only monitoring. You mentioned the ongoing trial in Cyprus of a man by the name of Osam Taleb Yaqub, who says, yes, he's been trying to monitor Israeli flights, Israeli tourists, but he says he was not there to carry out an attack. You're saying that Hezbollah is much more on the offensive and does not shy from attacking Israeli targets everywhere now, not only in Lebanon, not only in the Middle East, but beyond those areas.
Absolutely. Hezbollah attacks over the past few years have spanned everywhere from Azerbaijan to Greece, Turkey, Bulgaria, Egypt, and a host more places. We've seen surveillance in South Africa. We've seen a tremendous amount of activity. And this individual in Cyprus, while at one point he said that he was not there for anything involving terrorism, at another point he told police that he was a Hezbollah member, to be sure, and that while he didn't know exactly what they were planning in Cyprus, he assumed it was some type of attack, probably something aimed at bringing down an airplane. Why else would they ask me to conduct surveillance of Israeli flights arriving here? At another point he says, I'm part of Hezbollah. We conduct surveillance of Jews all over the world. That's what my group does.
So what do you think the European Union will do? Because we know that they are very divided. Some are saying, Hezbollah is a political player, therefore we must be careful with what we do. Some say, well, you know, the terrorism aspect is something of the past and not right now. What do you think the decision will be in terms of listing Hezbollah as a terrorist entity?
I've been spending a lot of time in Europe on this issue, and I'm going to be back in Europe, including in Paris, in a couple of weeks. The debate that we used to have, is Hezbollah's terrorism a thing of the past? That debate is a thing of the past. Among the things that Yaqub, this individual in Cyprus, did before he got to Cyprus was serving as a courier, delivering unknown packages to people in Europe, including someone in Lyon, France. There's no longer a debate. Is Hezbollah involved in terrorist activity? Is it involved in terrorist activity in Europe? Is it recruiting Europeans to engage in this activity? The debate now is something different. As you mentioned, it's can you and should you designate a group that is a terrorist group but is also a political group? And what would such a designation mean for the stability of Lebanon and for stability in the region in the Middle East? And here I have two basic points. The first is, imagine that I leave this interview and I go and rob a bank and the police arrest me, and then I say, listen, you can't arrest me because I give a lot of charity and I'm involved in politics. It doesn't fly. You don't get an excuse, a pass for terrorist activity simply because you're also involved in political activity, A. But B, I think it's very difficult to make an argument that Hezbollah is a force for stability in Lebanon or in the region. Look at what's happening in Syria right now. Hezbollah is, according to the U.S. State Department, part of the Assad regime's killing machine. About every week or 2 weeks, you have another senior Hezbollah official brought home from Syria to Lebanon in a body bag, killed fighting in Syria, and he's given full military honors described in Hezbollah's words as having done his jihadi duty in Syria. And this is now trickling over the border back into Lebanon. It's not new, by the way. In 2006, Hezbollah dragged Israel and Lebanon both into a war neither country wanted. In 2008, Hezbollah took over downtown Beirut by force of arms, leading to the deaths of several Lebanese citizens. Hezbollah has a history of doing things that have much less to do with its Lebanese identity. Even though it has a very strong Lebanese identity, it's trumped by its pro-Iran identity. Look, for example, at the drone that Hezbollah flew over southern Israel just a few weeks ago, conducting surveillance reportedly of the Israeli nuclear reactor in the south in Dimona. Iran publicly came out and said that they got the intelligence from that drone. Hezbollah had to assume that the Israelis would retaliate. The Israelis have said that they would retaliate against Lebanon for any type of incursion like that. Now, the Israelis showed restraint, and that's great. But Hezbollah, in their calculation, was clearly willing to take this risk, knowing that there was a very good chance that Israeli jets would come and pound Lebanon, leading potentially to the injury, death of individuals and loss of property in Lebanon. There's no way you can explain that as being in Lebanon's interests. That's in Iran's interests.
Do you think that because of the situation in Syria, Hezbollah is under pressure and might try to lash out, and also because of Iran's tensions with the West over the nuclear issue, do you expect that Hezbollah might do something major in terms of terrorist attacks, maybe in Europe or in the US or against European or American targets?
This string of attacks that we're seeing targeting Israeli tourists, one successful in Bulgaria and several other attempts, is already Hezbollah acting at Iran's behest as part of Iran's shadow war with the West over the nuclear campaign. This is Iran and Hezbollah trying to deter the United States, Israel, European powers from doing things to undermine the nuclear program, whether it's computer viruses or sanctions or what have you. And it's also a message saying that in the event that someone decides to bomb part of the Iranian nuclear program, that Iran and its proxies have the capability to conduct this type of asymmetric terrorist warfare. That's part of the message we're already seeing. In the event that there is an actual military confrontation, I think that it is a foregone conclusion there will definitely be acts of asymmetric terrorist attacks by Iranian agents themselves of the type that we've seen targeting Israeli diplomats in India, in Georgia, in Thailand, etc., and by Hezbollah. And it would not only be then targeting Israeli tourists, we could expect it to be targeting others as well. The fact is that even now, when Hezbollah is specifically targeting Israeli tourists, in Bulgaria they killed a European citizen, they killed a Bulgarian, because these are attacks that are not targeted. You can't put a bomb on a bus and only kill the people you want to kill.
You've worked in the U.S. government tracking this and other groups. Do you believe that they have dormant cells in the United States or in Western Europe that they could very easily activate if the circumstances become dire or if they get orders to become more active?
In real life, terrorists don't necessarily act the way you see them on TV, in some type of organized sleeper cell as such. I don't like that term. But it is a fact that Hezbollah has supporters, members, trained operatives across this wide spectrum. And there are such people in the United States, there are such people in Europe and elsewhere, Southeast Asia, South America, Africa. In my book, I have chapters on each of these regions. And there are within those communities of Hezbollah supporters and operatives, individuals who have called upon, could either provide support for people who could come in from abroad to carry out an attack, or could themselves carry out an attack. We've had several instances where people like that have been arrested here in the United States.
Okay, Matthew Levitt, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for your comments on Hezbollah. Thank you all for watching this edition of The Interview here on France 24.
Thank you.